Hey, happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. How we doing? I'm doing the normal thing here. We're going to go see if we're actually live in the group because I can't trust Facebook to tell me the truth. Should we ever trust Facebook to tell us the truth? The answer is no, friends. The answer is no. Turn down the volume. Okay, cool. And we'll try the everyone tag that for some reason I can. Ooh, it's going to let me do it today. I don't know why it's been so picky. We're just going to be grateful it's working today. There you go, y'all. There you go. So, welcome to Tuesday Tales. This is our 20-minute training that we do once a week, every Tuesday at 2 o'clock as best I can, because life is crazy and sometimes things shift. So, welcome to March. Welcome to March. So, I always call March Mucky March because, well, it gets mucky in March. And it did not fail us today. The day started with rain, and I have clients to go see. I'm actually leaving the house right after I'm done talking with you guys to go see my clients, and I've already had some of them be like, ugh, they're a mess. So just a little note for those of you that don't work with me in person, but maybe you have massage therapists that you have come out and work on your horses. We don't mind getting dirty, okay, to some extent. Like, it's to be expected, especially this time of year. I'm going to come home and I'm going to be covered in horsehair. That is just the way it is. I know that I'm going to get some dirt on me. But, please, please, please. Wetness, try and get them dry, okay? Because, like, my hands sliding over wet hair doesn't work. And, just getting the big chunky muds off is super helpful. Your horse doesn't really appreciate me grinding in dirt, right? So, it's not that we expect them to be perfectly clean. We know what we got ourselves into when we started being massage therapists for horses. But just a little cleanup, and definitely make sure they're as dry as possible, because if they're not dry, it's going to change how we interact with the horse. I do carry tools with me that help me to be able to work on them regardless of how wet or dry they are, but it's not the same, right? I have more tools in my toolbox if I don't have to worry about whether or not they're dry. So today, I actually had intended to talk to you a little bit about stress signals that your horse might be having that maybe you're not seeing as stress. And we're going to do that a smidgen. But on my way in here, because like Facebook is just full of distractions, right? Like I open Facebook and I see this post, and it's like walking down the hallway of a building. I walked into Facebook and there was this thing right in front of me. And what it was actually a post about shedding and how the wear and tear that shedding has on the body, and that it actually increases some processes that can create stress in your horse's system. And I was like, this is kind of right on point. Because I want to point out, I know that we say all the time, like, or at least I do, I say this all the time, that stress isn't just a mental thing, stress isn't just a physical thing, and it's not just an emotional thing. Mental stress adds to emotional stress, adds to physical stress. Physical stress adds to mental stress, adds to emotional stress. Have you ever hurt yourself? And because you were injured, your ability to tolerate pain is significantly less, right? Or your ability to tolerate stressful situations externally, work problems, is especially less because you're in physical pain, right? The same thing happens with our horses. I mean, that's just the way we are wired as organisms, because realistically, we are made up of many small, very individual pieces, right? This is how we end up with so many specialties, because there's so much more. Like, why do we have podiatrists? Like, the foot is just another part of the body, but there are significant and unique structures within the foot and unique problems that the foot faces compared to, say, the teeth, which is this whole other set of unique circumstances and unique structures that all kind of work on their own, but also interact completely with each other, right? And so in this post, which I did not read the whole thing because I was on my way in here, the long and the short of it is that when your horse is going through a natural change, aka spring and fall, shedding out, it strains other parts of the body because this change relies on metabolism, metabolics. And when we think metabolism, we think digestion. We think how fast is food being processed. But realistically, the reality is, metabolism and metabolics is more than just digestion. It's how the body alchemizes, transforms one thing to another, right? And so when we're looking at metabolic issues, it's not always a digestion issue. It's not always a food processing thing. Sometimes it's hormonal. And obviously, again, this is where we get to take everything and we get to recognize that it's never just one thing. It's always looking at the whole picture and how all these pieces interact for us to be able to determine what is the linchpin, what is the one thing that is kind of, or the domino, if you will, right? Right? What's that first domino that just knocks everything else over in its path and then creates a slew of whole different circumstances? And when we're looking at shedding in particular, this is actually a process that impacts the liver and the kidneys. And so this was interesting. Being in the industry for so long, working with horses for so long, we've done a lot of different, I've experienced a lot of different things from a lot of different angles. And one of the things I remember doing when I was much younger, working with the racehorses, is we would often do, and this is something I see now too, I just, 1 + 1 hasn't always equaled 2 because I didn't bother putting 1 + 1, right? So one of the things we used to do all the time, and I still see people do, is like in the spring and the fall, there would be an alternation of kidney flushes and liver flushes or cleanses, right? So giving the opportunity for these systems to kind of get a reset, to make sure, because especially it's important to recognize that liver and kidneys are kind of cleanup crews, okay? So they're processing a lot of things that are going through the body and cleaning up. And when those two organs get bogged down with toxins, if things aren't clearing out of them, then they end up being limited in what they're able to do. So I'm thinking that this is a very interesting thing that we were doing coincidentally. I mean, I think it was coincidental. I don't know. I'd have to ask, right? Because I was just, at the time, I was just doing the pattern, just doing the thing that I was told to do, right? Didn't have that background knowledge as to why we might want to do this. And now I kind of think maybe we don't do it right in the beginning of spring. Let the horses shed out, because it's actually, the shedding process is a metabolic process, which if you think about it too, think about Cushing's, for example. One of the telltale signs of Cushing's is that horses aren't shedding out. And it's not always Cushing's. Sometimes this can be a thyroid issue. But those are hormonal processes, and it directly impacts shedding. Those are metabolic processes that impact shedding. And so doesn't it just make sense that shedding, that whole process is actually impacting the body as a whole, the liver and the kidneys as well. And obviously depending on the horse's situation, if they do have one of these other, whatever I just said, Cushing's and thyroid issues and other hormonal imbalances, it could impact other systems as well. So doesn't it just make sense that those systems could use a little bit more support through this time? So again, now that I know what I know and I think about these connections, I think maybe the liver and the kidney flush is still good at this time of year, but maybe after they've shut out, maybe a little bit closer to summer, maybe a little bit more into winter, so that we give the organs a little bit of a break. We're not pushing them to eliminate things right after they've just, worked their tails off trying to get their job done. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention because, again, it tied right into the stress signals. So it's important to think about the stress signals that we see from our horses in more than just one way, because, that's the thing too. I see this a lot now, which is good because people are becoming aware, where they're like, well, is yawning really a sign of relaxation? And to that is like, context matters. Yawning can absolutely be a sign of stress. But what's the rest of the horse doing, right? And looking at, how's the horse breathing, and all these different context pieces are going to play into whether it's a stress response or not. But all in all, stress responses for every horse are going to be a little bit different, and it's, you have to look at the context, but it's never just one thing that we're evaluating. And it's tying back to, looking at the fact that emotional stress can lead to physical stress. So, and vice versa. So, where did it start? When I'm looking at a horse that has a lot of physical tension in their body, I ask a lot of questions, right? I ask a lot of questions to try and get the picture. So, I want to know, like, how long has this been going on? Has their living environment changed? Have they, has their diet changed? Because where the stress is coming from can kind of help us determine how we're going to alleviate it. Because if you're going into the situation and you're like, oh, this horse has a lot of tension in their body, and we can go through and we can release a lot of that tension manually. But if the tension is a result of the environment and that the horse is living in, then it's a very temporary fix. And next, I can come back in 2 days and the horse is going to be right back where I left it. Whereas if the true cause is something going on in the body and we can fix what's going on in the body, then when I come back in a couple of days or in a week or in a month, they shouldn't be right back where we started, right? And so when we can really evaluate where the stress comes from and what it actually is, whether it's emotional, mental, or a physical stress, it really gives us the upper hand to be able to come in and help the horse. So, things that you want to think about. Is your horse holding on to stress in their body? Like, can you see tension? Has their movement pattern changed? Have they changed how they're interacting with their herd? Do they have a herd? If they don't have a herd, then there's a good chance that there has an underlying level of stress already involved, So my horse is a racehorse, and they have a lot of time where they are alone and they just deal with it. And I might tend to argue with they're fine and we don't see a stress response in them, even if they're alone, is, well, right. They might not be showing it, but it doesn't mean that they aren't experiencing it. So if we are paying attention and we see subtle changes or repetitive behaviors, we can be like, yeah, there probably is a problem here with stress that maybe we didn't consider before, because either the horse has always been that way or they don't act like it's a problem, right? I know that you guys can think of times where you don't act like it's a problem and it is a real fucking problem, right? That classic line that women say, I'm fine. We're not fine. Same. And so is their performance consistent? And is their willingness to perform consistent, right? Is there been a change? When we pay attention to these subtle changes, everything from how well they're shedding out and other regular normal bodily functions to behavior patterns and interactions and movement, we can really assess a lot about the horse and figure out what's most important here is not just assessing, but also narrowing it down to what the actual problem is. Because if we start with anything less than the actual problem, we're not going to get an actual solution. And that is what, everything I do is all about. That's what all of my trainings are about for you guys. And all my programs, they all lead back to that, finding the root cause and finding an actual solution. And if we can't pinpoint the solution, then asking higher and better questions to be able to narrow it down more and more, and working with a team of caregivers. It's always a team, okay? There's a reason why there are specialists, and we don't have to limit ourselves. For example, I'm a massage therapist. I've taken all kinds of extra modalities. I've taken barefoot trimming and osteopathic. I'm in an osteopathic program in the clinical stages of that, finishing that up. And just lots of other training on top of all of my horse experience, right? However, with all of that in mind, it's always my goal when I work with a horse to be able to come alongside the other professionals. So when veterinarians are involved, sometimes I actually want to talk to them. Sometimes we just pass notes, essentially, back and forth. But I'm never going to doubt their expertise. I'm just going to ask more questions. So there's a horse that I got called out to work on who performed really, really well, was like state champion, did really great. And then coming back into the next season was just lackluster and super crabby, and it didn't really make sense to anybody. They're like, well, he's not really performing, and he's not gaining weight. He's kind of lost a little bit of weight, and just not happy with where this is going. So what's going on? So I got called out to work on him, and yeah, he was super crabby, and he didn't want to be touched. And in that first massage session, things were great. But I did notice a pain pattern, and I said, okay, I know you've had the vet out, so what happened here? And they're like, well, we previously had issues in the right hind, but the vets didn't think that it was worth revisiting, because, when they palpate it, he doesn't react and he's sound. Okay, so I come out the next session and I'm like, well, he's better and worse. Like he's better because he's not trying to eat me as much, but he's still really uncomfortable. And by the end of that session, when I went to, when they went to take him back to his stall, he was clearly not sound. And at that point, I was like, okay, well, this is the area. They need to image this area. And sure enough, they image that area and there's a fracture there, But it wasn't about saying, well, the vet's wrong. It was about saying, there's more here. This is where we need to look. And when I can give that kind of assistance to a veterinarian, that's a whole different ball game than just saying this is the problem, somebody else fix it, right? Having a conversation. And there's been other clients where it's like a much bigger problem than just, fractures are a big deal, but then just a fracture, right? Another horse that I worked with had so many issues that we just didn't even know where to start, right? And I just kept saying, it shouldn't be like this. And she's like, well, I've talked to the vets and this is what we're doing. I'm like, but it shouldn't be like this. And eventually, one final symptom popped up. And that one final symptom that popped up led us back down the rabbit hole and asking veterinarians questions, asking farrier questions, and eventually leading us to the point where it was like, yes, we have a problem that is affecting the feet, that is affecting metabolism, not necessarily, yes, digestion, but also the way that the muscles were processing lactic acid, getting lactic acid out of there, and just the way fluid was moving through the horse's body, a little bit of lymph back up and all of these kinds of things. And so it ended up involving all of us to be able to get this horse through the situation. But veterinary care and hoof care were top priorities in that, right? So it's always about the team because it's never just one thing. It's all aspects of the horse. And in that particular case, the horse was not happy to be touched. She didn't move super well. She would show some improvement and then she would go backwards. She was really picky eater. She had to have special shoes, which eventually, we were able to work our way around the special shoes because once we started fixing all the other issues, the feet started to come along, right? And so it was a matter of working together because it's, again, never just one thing. It's all these different aspects and looking at all the different signs that the horse was giving us that she was in stress, even though she seemed like a decent horse most of the time, right? Like she had a decent personality and she wasn't like anxious by any means. She was still under stress. So it's never just one thing. So if you're having a hard time with your horse, don't give up. Don't give up. There's always another sign and there's always another way to look at it. And there's always higher and better questions that we can be asking to get to the root of the problem. And on that note, what'd you notice that's new in the group this week? Did you notice something new? We have a new member. Our new member is a special guest. The rider of Rhiannon. She is here to kind of help us and guide us on the next phase of our journey. So I encourage you to follow along with her story. In the next day or so, I'll be making a post that kind of creates a table of contents for her so you can follow her journey and what she posts in the storyline. And by next week, you should understand a little bit of where we're going with this, but it is something fun and exciting. So please, for me and for you, because I think this is super fun and you guys are going to love it and really learn a lot from it and whatnot, play along and kind of see where that's going. But what she's really here to teach us is that we can tap in and connect with our horses and create solutions based on what we already know and what our horses are communicating to us on many different levels. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for being in the group, guys, and I will chat with you later. Get out there and do some fun pony shit because it's Mucky March and the weather is turning. So, all right, see you guys later.